Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Great to have you back in the shop with me today. This time around, we're going to get right into some Damascus. Stick with me, should be fun. We'll talk at the other end. Alright guys, this is going to be a pretty quick one. We've got a stainless steel canister that's 1.25 inches on the inside. We've got a couple of mild steel plugs we're going to put in either end. Make them just a hair large, drive them into place. We're going to weld them up. So we're going to do a little bit of an experiment here. You all know that I always use a stainless steel canister because the 1084 steel in that can and my other parts will not weld to the inside of it, and the canister comes off really easily. Okay, so this is some more ingredients for our Damascus we'll be putting together in this canister, and we're going to use a piece of an old file as the cutting edge. In case we want to turn this Damascus into a knife. You can see the back side's being ground off there. A little 1084 powder. And these pieces in this Tupperware container were donated to the channel by Ed Burnett, and they're punched out sections of keys. I believe it's the section of the key up on the bow where your keychain would go through. And they seem to have a little carbon in them. We're going to see how this works out. But we've got a cutting edge on this Damascus anyway, so even if they are mild steel, they'll just be in the body. So what we're going to do with this as an experiment is we're going to minimize everything. We're going to go ahead and weld up the canister just like normal, but when we put it in the forge, we're going to bring the temperature up to minimum welding temperature. And we're only going to let it soak for about 5 minutes. And normally when we forge a canister, I'll bring it down about 40%. So almost half of what its normal dimensions or beginning dimensions were. So the little weld on the side of the canister indicates the side that the file is on, which will be the cutting edge. And I'll put the same thing on the handle and the bottom of the canister. So there'll be no confusion as to which side is the cutting edge. Alright, we're going to reduce this about 10 to 15% rather than the typical 40%, and we're going to see what happens. Now if I don't get enough heat and I don't reduce it enough, we'll probably end up with some cracks in the 1084. It won't fuse together well enough, and if we forge it too cold, it'll tend to crack the outside. Now that's not too bad. The ideal situation would be to have it, forged weld solid. If we do end up with some cracks, we'll see how deep they go. So what I'm doing here is experimenting with time, heat, and pressure to find out exactly what the minimum is to make a canister Damascus, and then in the future we'll be able to exceed that and be sure that we're doing the right thing, because everything is pretty much by feel, just kind of eyeball guesswork. And if we can put a little bit of work in and give ourselves some parameters, it'll make it a lot easier. Sort of part of the recipe, you might say. So you can see where I started cutting that canister open, and it busted right off the handle. So that tells me there was not enough heat to get that billet to weld to the mild steel up in the handle, which is what I prefer. I can keep that handle on and continue to forge it. But in this case we'll have to weld a new handle on. But that canister peels right off, and there's our billet. And it does have some little cracks along the edges, and I kind of suspected that. We did not let it soak quite long enough. And you can see the area that's the cutting edge on the end of the billet. I dipped it in a little bit of ferric chloride to find that edge, make sure I was going the right direction. And I'm welding my handle offset so that we know where that edge is as we're forging this out. Get a little flux on this thing, see if we can weld up some of those cracks, but we'll see. And it seemed to be just on the back side of the billet, opposite of the file that we welded in for a cutting edge. Alright, we'll get it under Floyd the press here, squeeze this thing out, and as I'm doing that I'm seeing those cracks open up further and further. So it's an experiment that gave us a lot of good information, but the billet didn't come out great. A few cracks here and there, so ground along the edges and trying to grind those cracks out as much as I can before we finish this off. We're going to take the handle off and we're going to get this thing over to the surface grinder. Make it nice and flat on both sides. It'll make quick work of it. And that's where our crack is. The biggest crack anyway. The others will sort of be revealed once we surface grind it and give it an etch. And this is doesn't take too long at all. So you can notice that the belt changed from green to red here. I put a pretty aggressive 36 grit on it to get the surface down, and then I go to a 60 grit to kind of give it a little bit better finish before I dirty etch these things. And I call this a dirty etch because the steel really isn't refined well enough to get a good etch, but it gives me a good idea of what's going on here. It's got a very interesting pattern in it from those key bits that were in there. And we'll take a closer look at this here in a second. See what it looks like. Alright. Looks a little like malaria germs, I think. I don't know. It kind of looks cool. And this side isn't quite as dramatic. We didn't grind quite as much off this side. Can't quite see that, but you can see that crack in that little valley right there. So we got a couple of little cracks along the way here in this one, but I think we'll be able to do something with this billet, or maybe we'll send it off to somebody. I've got a list of folks who are waiting for some Damascus, so maybe we'll send this off to one of those folks. That is a really cool pattern. It gives me a good idea for something I'm going to try in the future. Alright guys, there you go. Little piece of Damascus, a little smaller than we normally build here, but it gave us some good information. So hope you enjoyed it. I did. It was great fun, and that's going to be it. I wanted to thank the patrons. You guys rock, and all the subscribers. You old guys that have been around forever, and you new subscribers, really appreciate that. So if you think about it, like the video, thumbs up, and that's about it. Take care of yourselves. We'll talk to you soon. Be safe. Bye-bye now.